Today I'm going to show you how to take a basic pop song form and turn it into some modern progressive metal. Let's head to the Prog School. When most people think of prog, they think of long songs with complex arrangements that go a million different directions, and sometimes that's true, but there's a lot of great prog musicians who use basic song structures and forms in their writing, specifically the pop song form. The pop song form has been the dominant song structure in mainstream music since about the 1960s. Before that, there was a lot more of the 12-bar blues and 32-bar song forms that came from the traditions of blues and jazz, but the pop song form is what you'll hear the most often these days. But that doesn't mean it isn't useful outside of pop music, and in fact, I think it's a really good foundation for more complex music because there's an inherent cohesiveness that comes from this pop song form. And if you're new to writing songs, this is a great place to start, especially if you're writing prog, because prog can have a tendency to throw too many musical ideas out and not fully develop them. And what happens is you end up with a bunch of cool sounding riffs, melodies, and rhythms all smashed together, but there's nothing tying them together to make a good song. I want to go through the basics of this form, and then talk about how this can be expanded and added onto to make it work in a more complex musical style like prog. At its most basic, a pop song form looks like this: verse, chorus, bridge, or a solo, or sometimes even a third verse, and then the last chorus. The most important part of a pop song is the chorus. It's what the entire song builds to, and it's what the whole song is built around. Now, this is a pop song in its most basic form, so how can we expand upon this? There's a whole bunch of options, and to demonstrate these, I want to take a look at the song Broken Epistemology off my new EP, The Great Stereopticon. Before you watch the rest of this lesson, go check out the playthrough video for Broken Epistemology. It features my good friend and a Sense of Gravity bandmate CJ Jenkins on vocals, and he absolutely slayed this one. Also, you can pick up the Great Stereopticon EP on my Bandcamp and find it in all of your major streaming services, links below. And subscribe, hit the bell notification, like, comment, share, all of that if you haven't yet. It really helps me to keep making this type of content for all of you. At its core, this song follows the pop song structure. It has a first verse and chorus, a second verse and chorus, and a bridge and a last chorus. But with that as the framework, it goes a bunch of different places, starting with the intro. In the simplest of songs, you might start right away with the first verse, with the vocals entering immediately, but most songs have an intro of some kind. It could be a chord progression from the verse, it could be an instrumental medley, it could be a riff, could even be the chorus played quietly, but something that introduces the song, the tempo, the key, the overall mood, unless you know what kind of a journey you're in for. The intro kicks off with this big melodic hook. I wanted something really strong and anthemic. The chords weave between D minor and D major, borrowing from both, including this first inversion D major 7 chord with F sharp in the bass. I really like the sound of this chord, and it comes back later in the song. And with these kinds of sections, I'm not necessarily going for really complex chords, but I want some unique sounding progressions with a couple of chords that you wouldn't expect. So we have D minor, G minor 11, and then you have this D major 7 with F sharp in the bass. You have B flat, major 7 sharp 11, C, and then G, add 9 with B in the bass. And then at the end of this section, there's F major 7, A flat 6 9, and then F with A in the bass. With a pop song, you'd probably get an intro that's just one idea like this, but in prog, it's very common for the intro to be much longer. In the case of Broken Epistemology, the vocals don't enter for over a minute, and the intro also has this main heavy riff. It's totally fine to have multiple sections in an intro in a prog tune. If you do this though, I'd recommend having these sections contrast each other as much as possible. My goal with this intro was to set up some of the themes and motifs of the song, but also to set the mood. It starts more grand and epic, and then hits that heavy, groovier riff, touching on some of the different feels that are going to get expanded upon later. One thing I would say is that if you have a longer intro with multiple sections, it's important that at least one of these ideas comes back again later in the song. As you add more to this basic pop form, there's more you have to remember to connect as you get further along. From here it goes to a pre-verse, which is just setting up the first verse. Sometimes you can go directly into the vocals, but the first verse here is very dynamically different from the intro, and it needed a little bit of a transition into it. In a pop song, a verse will usually be pretty simple and act mostly as a setup for the chorus. I like to give my verses a bit of their own character. They're still going to help to build to the chorus, but they're also going to have some interesting ideas of their own. In Prog, you might have a verse that ends up being pretty complex. Now, it doesn't have to be. Sometimes a really rocking, straightforward verse is the right approach for a song, but I opted for a more complex verse, specifically rhythmically complex.
No way to, no way to believe in my life beneath grace. Facts that I refuse to face. I believe you. I believe you.
The verses are based on this rhythm that's 9 16th notes long, grouped as 3-2-2-2. 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2. This is most obvious in the low synth figure that plays straight 16th notes using this 9-note pattern. And this pattern happens 4 times, which fits into a bar of 9/4, which I'm feeling against a quarter note pulse, which creates this pretty complex polymeter. The bass, rhythm guitars, and kick drum are playing the beginning of each of these patterns of 9. The vocals hit some of those as well, but they're also filling up the space left by the rhythm instruments. This can be a good arrangement trick if there's some space in the instrumentation to have the vocals fill up that space. That way each of them have their own place and they're not fighting each other. Harmonically, it's entirely rooted on A, mostly in the Phrygian mode, and the vocal melody stays on the note A for almost the entire verse. The chorus in this song, as well as a lot of the other sections, are very melodically focused, so having a verse focused almost entirely on rhythm creates a nice contrast. And contrast is one of the most important things when you're writing a song. In this case, having the verse be basically devoid of an actual melody makes the chorus hit a lot harder. One other big change I made here was to have there be 2 verses before the first chorus. The first verse is quiet and the second is louder, with this little interlude that plays between them. It's not uncommon to hear this 2-verse approach at the beginning of a song. This builds some extra anticipation for the chorus.
They chose, can't be my dream. Caught behind the camera, I can't see the prisons made for those who believe we're free. Caught behind the camera, I see.
So what makes a good prog chorus? There are a couple things I always think about with a chorus: having it be simpler than the other parts of the song, having good melodic and rhythmic hooks, ideas that people can really latch onto, and having interesting harmony. Not necessarily complex harmony, but interesting. The chorus of Broken Epistemology is in 6/4, much simpler than the verses in the bridge, but still has some unusual rhythms. It goes back and forth between this rhythm. This is a 4/3 polyrhythm, which is really highlighted by the vocals. Got behind the camera, I can 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4, and this trades with another cool rhythm. This is a 5/16 note long pattern grouped as 2 and 3, and this happens in the intro, but here in the chorus I'm fitting it into a bar of 6/4. So it's playing 4 times, and then there's an added quarter note at the end. So here's the beat. Here's the pattern. And this is another example of connecting the song together with simple ideas. This rhythm is happening in the intro, but it's also happening in the chorus. And the more that I can do this, the more cohesive the whole song is going to be. Harmonically, I wanted this to be more involved than the verse. The verses are basically stagnant, hanging on one note, which builds a lot of tension. To release that tension and to have the chorus contrast the verses, I bring in more chords. Similar to the intro, I'm going between D minor and D major here, and there's a lot of first inversion chords, meaning the third is in the bass. So we have B flat over D, A minor over C, and then G over B. Those are all first inversion chords. Then G minor over B flat, E flat, C minor over E flat, and then the D major 7 over over F sharp. Every single one of those chords is a first inversion chord except for the E flat. These first two are from D minor. This is from D major, the G over B. Then we have D minor. These last two chords here are like a D Phrygian type of the sound because you have that E flat. And then it's to the D major 7. So I'm borrowing from a bunch of different sounds that are all rooted on D. Another thing I do is to have the guitars and bass play an actual riff here instead of just pounding out the chords. I like this approach in choruses, and I think it can add a lot, especially in a heavier song like this. There's one other thing that I do with the choruses in this song that I'll talk about when I get to future choruses, but this first chorus is 5 bars long, so just keep that in your mind. Already in this song, I've transformed what is at its most basic, just a verse and chorus, into a 2-part intro, a pre-verse, 2 verses with an interlude, and the chorus. This basic pop form is providing a loose outline that I'm really able to expand upon. After the first chorus, it goes back to the main riff. It was important to me that this riff happens twice so that it doesn't just live in a vacuum on its own, and from here it goes to the third verse.
Tattoo off skin, naked bread. No place for me to stay, plant my flag in. Should fix that. No place for me to play, sacrifice the altar.
There's another short setup for this verse. As I mentioned earlier, the verses are quite different, and jumping right into it didn't flow the way that I wanted it to. In this verse, I do a pretty common thing that happens in a lot of pop and rock music, and that's to have the verse that happens between the first 2 choruses be louder and have more instrumentation. It's already built in dynamics to the chorus, so it's good to keep the dynamics higher here. The vocals go up into a higher register here, the guitars get busier with these muted notes, the drums play louder, and there's more layers of vocal harmony. Adding new layers is a great way to differentiate a second verse from a first verse, especially if they have the same melodic and rhythmic structure.
Skin, naked bread. No place for me to stay, plant my flag in. Should fix that. No place for me to play, sacrifice the altar.
Now in Prog, the verses don't have to be the same at all. It's not uncommon for a second verse in a Prog song to be completely different from the first, which is something you'd almost never hear in pop music. Keep that in mind if you're writing a Prog song using this pop form, that the verses can be completely unrelated, and that's something I've done a number of times myself. In this particular song, I decided to keep them the same and just orchestrate each one a little bit differently. That brings us to this.
Because he made
This happens between the verse and second chorus, which is technically a pre-chorus. A pre-chorus is used as a way to connect the verse and chorus and to build even more anticipation for the chorus. Usually a pre-chorus would happen before both of the first 2 choruses, sometimes before all of the choruses, but here I just do it into the second chorus. Once again, it's a small adjustment from what you'd hear in a pop song, but it felt like the song needed this extra push into the second chorus. I also introduced these chord stabs, which will happen later in the bridge. Again, I'm always thinking about how I can connect the song together. The second chorus is the same as the first, except it's longer. Here it's 7 bars instead of 5. This is a really nice way to make your choruses more than just a copy-paste idea. To have a shorter chorus first and then fully expand it the second time, it's almost like the chorus gets teased the first time you hear it and then it's fully realized the next time it appears. Also notice that both of these choruses have an odd number of measures, 5 and 7. In most pop and rock music, you typically have choruses that are 4, 8, maybe 16 bars, phrases in multiples of 4, because that's what we're used to hearing in modern music. Breaking away from that is another way to alter this pop song form into something a little bit different. Now for the fun part. The bridge is where you can really take the song in a completely different direction. It's not uncommon in a prog song for the bridge to be 5 or 10 minutes long and go all over the place, with long solos, instrumental passages, multiple new sections, and new melodic and rhythmic material. A bridge can be as simple as a new vocal section or even just a solo, but I usually use the bridge as an opportunity to branch out a little bit more. The bridge in this song consists of 2 major parts, a heavy riff-based section and a fusion-inspired melodic section. One thing I try to do with a long, complex bridge is to call back to other parts of the song at least a few times, just so the song doesn't go completely off the rails. After the second chorus, I play a few measures of the intro before it goes to the heavy riffing. The intro melody hasn't played since the beginning of the song, so hinting at it here is going to keep it fresh in the listener's ear. Up to this point, I've just been hinting at the heaviness, so this is the perfect place to go all out. This part goes back and forth between these fast 16th note triplet chugs, which are based on the 2-3 pattern from the intro and the chorus, and these faster riffs with chord stabs. These are the same chord stabs that happened right before the second chorus. Once again, these small connective ideas are really important. This is the only part in the song where the harsh vocals completely take over. I love harsh vocals, but for me, I like to use them as a way to kick things up a notch, not as something that's going to happen all the time, but it's going to give that extra aggression when it's needed. It's a good contrast from the rest of the vocals so far. To connect the 2 main sections of the bridge, there's this silly 8-bit nonsense. This is just that faster bridge riff done with 8-bit sounds. I take my music very seriously, but there's a silly element to a lot of prog, and it's fun to go there sometimes. From here it moves to the second part of the bridge via this really dissonant heavy riff. This is the second major vocal section in the bridge, and typically you'd just have one, but once again I'm using the bridge as a place to push this song structure further. To contrast the heaviness from the first vocal section in the bridge, it comes way down in dynamics here.
Behind the lens
The harmony gets more involved as well, and the bridge can be a great place to explore some more complex ideas, not just from a technical perspective, but harmonically and melodically. The chords here are A major 7 sharp 11, F sharp minor 6 9, A flat with B flat in the bass, and then an A flat major 7. Then the first 3 chords repeat, and it ends on A flat major 7 sharp 5. And there haven't been too many super extended chords in this song up to this point, so these bring a nice harmonic balance. I love interesting chords and progressions, but they often have more impact if there's some simple harmony to counter it. Rhythmically, there's more of these 2-3 patterns of 5 here, with a few added beats on the end to get measures of 7-4. I also call back a little bit to the intro melody in the background vocal figures. I wanted it to come down in dynamics here because the energy in the song has been really high up to this point, but I didn't want it to stay down for too long, so the heavy dissonant riff from earlier slams in between the vocal phrases here. These kind of dramatic dynamic shifts keep the listener on edge, and while they don't always work, here I thought it was very effective. The second vocal phrase here kicks up in dynamics and helps to move into the solo with some awesome high notes from CJ. The solo is short and sweet. It plays over the chords that just happened with a rhythm from the chorus underneath. This solo is the connection between the bridge and the chorus, so drawing ideas from both of these parts makes the transition work well. Transitions are something I think a lot about, especially if a song goes in a bunch of different directions. In this case, the entire solo is really just there to make the move back to the chorus less jarring. I don't always feel the need to have solos, but in this case I felt it was necessary. It's all about what serves the song best as a whole. At this point, all I need to do is let the song play out naturally. I'll use the ideas from earlier and bring it to a climactic conclusion. I simplified the last chorus. Instead of having the riff underneath, the guitars are just pounding out big chords. I also put the chords in root position in the second half of this last chorus instead of in first inversion. They were in first inversion before, B flat, A minor, and G. And then in the second half of the chorus, they go to root position. Flat, A minor, G. It's just another way to make this a little bit more straightforward and impactful. I also bring in some vocal harmonies here, where it was just the main vocal on the other choruses. So each of these three choruses in the song are slightly different. The first is shorter, the second is fully played out, but without harmonies and a guitar and bass riff underneath, and the last chorus has harmonies and a simplified guitar and bass part. Having these variations to each chorus avoids the copy-paste problem that arises in a lot of pop music, and it allows for the chorus to grow with the song instead of being a stagnant thing. And now finally, it moves to the outro. Just like the last chorus, the outro is a simplified version of the intro. Gone are the odd time signatures, it's all in 6/4 here, big guitar chords with the melody soaring over the top, and I have the vocals join this melody as well. The other times the intro played, it was just instrumental, and having the vocals here is another way to tie this whole song together. I love this idea of taking more complex musical passages and simplifying them later on in a song. It always feels really impactful to me. And to tie everything together, the song ends with one round of the super heavy chugging from the bridge, complete with some layered harsh vocals. This song was a blast to put together, and I think it's a good example of how a basic pop song structure can lay the foundation for a pretty involved and complex piece of music. That structure is helping to tie all of the many musical ideas together in a way that builds naturally and feels cohesive. If you're new to writing music, I'd recommend you start with a basic song structure like this. It's one of the easiest ways to start writing songs that make sense and feel complete. Prog can often go overboard on the crazy complex song structures that go all over the place, and I really enjoy doing that kind of thing myself, but if you can't write a good, solid, well-structured song first, chances are you shouldn't be jumping into writing 15-minute Prog odysseys. Hopefully some of these ideas are helpful for you when you're writing your next song, and as always, if you enjoyed this lesson, subscribe, hit the bell notification, like, comment, share. Till next time, stay proggy.